What's up, ADHD crew? If you're currently a student or you're thinking of becoming a student in the near future, I want to give you a little bit of insight into how I survived it as a student, and I want to save you the suffering that I had to go through to figure out how to organize myself more efficiently. So I'm going to show you my study practices, my organization techniques, as well as some of the things I wish I did, and just the general day-to-day living and adulting, if you like, to just look after myself and take care of my responsibilities. So let's begin. I think before I get into anything about learning and organization, I need to get this out there first. It's extremely important that you get some kind of support, right? So even if you're not diagnosed, you still want to look for some kind of mentorship or support group or somebody that you can speak to. And I wish I did this much sooner instead of waiting a year or 2 years into my course, because I would have got much better grades and I would have been happier overall. I know for a lot of people with ADHD, it's extremely difficult to take action and actually make things happen and take responsibility, because I've been there myself. In the back of my mind, I knew full well that I should be doing this and speaking to people and sorting out my stuff, but I just put it off. I procrastinated. Please don't do this. Believe me, the longer you go without support and helping yourself and talking to somebody, the worse things are going to get, and you're going to end up playing catch up for the rest of the semester, and you're going to fall behind. So I don't care who it is, speak to your lecturer, speak to a friend, a colleague. Just find somebody that can refer you to a support system of some kind so that you can get somebody to sit with you and help you out, and you can talk about your issues that you face with studying. The next thing I want to touch on is the study environment. Environment can make or break your experience and your ability to stay focused. So I encourage you to experiment with different study setups and environments. See what helps you the best. Now for me, I needed complete solitude in order to focus and concentrate on my studies. So the campus library, although it was the right environment, a lot of the times it was too distracting because it was just flooded with other students, and the noise was extremely distracting and I just couldn't really focus, right? So it was kind of counterproductive. The only times I could go to the library and actually get some work done was in the off-peak times or during the evening where the students were off out somewhere. So for me it was rather tricky, and I had to do a lot of introspection to see what worked best for me. Some of you may prefer to study at home, and that was an option for me for a while as well, because at home you have the ability to isolate yourself further, and you've got the added comfort and safety of your own nest. But there is a caveat. I think when you study at home, you've got the distractions of things like Netflix. It's so easy to just jump in bed and watch movies and play video games. It's almost too comfortable. So again, this is what it boils down to, is finding that environment that you can mimic the workplace so that you take it seriously. So the bottom line, I would say, is create a dedicated go-to study place that's orderly, clean, and tidy. Keep the clutter to a minimum, and any clutter and unnecessary distractions you need to eliminate as much as possible. Some of you might prefer to study with some kind of music, in which case I would recommend doing so if it helps you, and perhaps getting yourself some noise cancelling headphones. This was something that I used a lot in order to block out external sound, but most of the time I didn't even listen to music, because for me, I personally prefer complete silence. So instead of listening to music, I'd have silicone earplugs with the headphones on top so that I had complete silence. Really helpful for when I wanted to go to the library in the day and I had to get some work done. Okay, so now you have to have the right tools to help you to stay on track. In my opinion, the most beneficial way for ADHD people to learn is by things being very visual, easy to access, and highly memorable. So having tools that can allow you to take pride in organizing yourself, as well as giving you consistent reminders of your responsibilities, is crucial. To name some of the tools that I invested in, firstly, I used a physical calendar that I put on my wall, and I would write down important events and deadlines and circle them so that I could see every day where I needed to invest my time. But don't stop there. I think it's important to also utilize smartphones these days by using apps such as Google Calendar app. That's what I use. So effectively I had two sets of calendars. One I could see every day at home, and one that I could carry around with me wherever I went that would also allow me to have alarms and reminders as well. So I really recommend you spend some time out of your day setting up some kind of schedule. Other things I used was whiteboards and notice boards. Again, these can be bought very cheaply and they can be very effective at seeing your goals and things that need to get done. Keeping it on my bedroom door was one of my go-to methods, because every time I had to leave the room, it would be right there in front of me and I couldn't really escape it. I also used color-coded document files. Things like these are great and they allow you to put in multiple documents where you can just put a little tag at the top and write the subject, the topic, whatever you want, whatever works for you best. And that way you can easily access the right parts of your course that you're trying to study. And one final thing I recommend for organization is invest in some kind of filing cabinet or storage boxes. You can buy plastic containers that are very handy to store away your documents and your paperwork. Great options for students on a budget, and it allows you to make things much more accessible. And perhaps you might even want to label the drawers so that you can see exactly what's inside. So the bottom line is, the more visible and memorable things are, the easier it's going to be for you to stay on track. You don't have to spend a lot of money either. A lot of universities offer discount cards on the first day or the opening day. So have a look around. Don't be too impulsive, but you really do want to invest in these things because it's going to change the game. Okay, so on to the learning aspect. In my experience, people with ADHD learn very similarly to how children learn. It's usually through a combination of connecting emotions with images and sounds. One of my favorite ways to learn is through video. I often find that YouTube is an incredible source of education, and more often than not, you can get the answers you're looking for much more quickly than you can through university. Nowadays, a lot of universities offer lecture slides that are very visual, and you can easily download them on the university intranet website. And if you can, I'd consider printing out these lecture slides and keeping them in a folder so that you can look through them and annotate, make notes, and so on. So when it comes to studying, I do recommend you try to make it visual and try to make it fun. For example, you could try making flashcards. If you can connect an image to a certain academic concept, or an acronym where you have letters that mean different things and make up a phrase, and I find that overall this is a much more effective way to retain the information. Now, another thing you could try is taking a dictaphone into the lecture or class. Because in my opinion, when you're there in class, it can be very hard to focus entirely on the lecture and what's being said, especially if it's noisy, the students are chit-chatting. It's very distracting. So I believe that it helps a lot to revisit that lecture by having a recording there, because sometimes when you're studying, you miss out on key explanations that the teacher says that can be very helpful to your understanding of the subject. So try that out. Try listening back over the lecture and taking notes as you go along. I think it's more important to be present in lectures rather than writing every word down word for word, because it's much harder to keep up. In my opinion, you don't really take in the information because you're too focused on trying to write all the words down instead of actually taking on board the meaning of it. So I think it's better to record it and listen to it and perhaps just make general notes and highlight important pieces of information using color highlighters. In regards to learning in the classroom, I recommend that you position yourself centrally, so that way you can isolate your center of attention and you can minimize other distractions, such as other students talking or looking out the window, right? You want to make it as hard as possible for you to look anywhere else. And this goes for the people that you're around. Perhaps you want to avoid other students that don't really take the education that seriously, or they distract you too much by talking. Get involved with other people who take the course really seriously, because they're going to help you to stay motivated on your studies. And finally, when it comes to studying, I want you to try blocking out some time, spending maybe 20 minutes out of your day to just make a little schedule on your Google Calendar app or on your physical calendar, or perhaps even just drawing one on paper from scratch and putting it up somewhere really visible. But if you struggle to stay on track with your study periods, try using the Pomodoro technique. That's a great little way to study in short bursts of time, and it allows you to have frequent breaks in between so that you don't get too overwhelmed and you don't zone out too much. It's entirely up to you how often you take a break, but I think the standard is around 20 minutes of study with a 5-minute break, and you repeat that over and over for however long your study period is. At the end of the day, you have to do what works for you. You have to work with your ADHD instead of trying to follow a model that just doesn't work with you. It's like trying to shove a cube into a circular hole. It's not going to work. And if you're struggling to get motivated to start on something, I recommend you just get on YouTube for 10 minutes, set an alarm, and watch some videos on the subject you're trying to study. Because I find that sometimes that's all I needed to get the ball rolling. And the final stage is just day-to-day living. What worked for me really well was giving everything a home, right? So as an example, I would say keep your laptop, keep your books, your pencil case, etc. all in your backpack, and keep that backpack in the same place in your room every day. So that way you can just pick it up and go, and you know exactly where your essentials are. It's all about creating habits, right? The more often you implement these techniques, it's going to become second nature. So when it comes to other things like meal preparation and food, I would say just shop simply, buy budget-friendly foods and throw things together in a plastic container to take with you. It can be very cheap, and you can just season it or use sauces to give it a bit more flavor. Because this way, if cooking is too much of a stress for you, you can eat meals that are more easy to put together, and you don't have to resort to buying junk food. You don't have to waste your money on these unfilling meal deals. And honestly, I think it's more important to have whole foods. Don't fall into the trap of buying junk food, because it's going to harm your mental health. It's going to give you crappy performance. One of my favorite meals was just jacket potato with tuna. And a lot of these ingredients can cost literally pence. It can cost you maybe £1 or £2 for a couple of meals. Something I also did was investing in a small mini refrigerator that I could keep in my room, because I found it easier to differentiate my food from my roommates. Now, if you're a student or you have been a student, you're probably aware that living with other people can get a bit ugly sometimes if people don't clean up after themselves. This might be you if you have ADHD and you're a bit messy. So I think keeping your own stuff in your own place is going to be easier for you to avoid any confrontation. The next tip I would say is minimize your belongings, right? You really don't need that much stuff. And honestly, the more stuff you have cluttering out your room, the harder it's going to be mentally to stay organized everywhere else. So perhaps keep a simple wardrobe that's not too much effort to stay on top of in terms of washing and ironing, and perhaps just purge stuff lying around that you don't need. And one final tip, limit how much you party. Alcohol and drugs is a one-way ticket to spiraling out of control, getting into the wrong crowd, and just worsening your ADHD symptoms. Okay, so you want to be kind to yourself. You want to treat your body and mind with respect. Take pride in your education and your well-being. Well, I think that's enough for now. I think that's all we have time to cover. But if you want more specific information on things such as money management, sleep, procrastination, etc., I've left a few links to my past videos in the description box below, so feel free to check those out if you want a little bit more advice. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care and good luck.